was going to start this video with a picture of Willie Nelson anyway, and then the news hits that he and Dylan are going on tour together. I've seen them on stage together multiple times. It's always very special, so I will be there when they swing by these parts. But anyway, why was I going to put a picture of Willie Nelson? Because his most famous song is probably On the Road Again. Thing is, his friend Bob Dylan beat him to the punch in using that title for a song with his infinitely weirder song by the same title, of course, On the Road Again. Second to last song on the first, and therefore electric side of the record, bringing it all back home. No doubt a very purposeful touch by Dylan and his team to make the electric side the first side of the record. And of course, whether or not fans were happy or upset about that fact, the fact that he was now playing electric music, they have now been, audio attacked with songs like, of course, Subterranean Homesick Blues, Maggie's Farm, and Outlaw Blues, which we covered last time. And what do they get hit with next? Well, the weirdest song Dylan had ever put out at this point, I would say, On the Road Again. Now, if there's one thing I think these videos have proven thus far, it's that there are often untold depths to Dylan's songs, even when it seems like there shouldn't be or there isn't. A perfect example of that is our very last video and song, Outlaw Blues. So one mistake with Dylan is thinking that a just fun, crazy song is just that, which is what it would be with other songwriters, just a fun, crazy exercise, and there's nothing wrong with that. The flip side, the opposite mistake you can make, is trying to see things that aren't there, right? Not every lyric of his has to have a wealth of meanings, connections, observations to be had if you can find them. And while I think with Dylan it's mostly a case of the former, by far, once you do the work to dig in, yeah, most of the time there's so much there. Today's song might be one of the ones where there isn't. And I feel trepidation making that claim because then later on I'll find out there's some complex game he's playing with the lyrics. But anyway, let's say what we can about the song. Well, there's often a starting point with Dylan, something that gets the ball rolling, and in this case it seems to be this old song here, same title, so he was beaten to the punch as well, and it was by the Memphis Jug Band. They were together from the mid-20s to the late 50s. They put this song out in 1929. And that does seem to be part of the equation here. It's definitely not as strong of a starting point as is sometimes the case in Dylan's career, where he does kind of like a stealth remake. I think the main thing is that the song is really fun, a little bit wild, and mostly about a woman. Dylan's song shares all those elements, although it sounds nothing like this one. And narratively, it's really different as well. In the Memphis Jug Band song, the woman is disloyal, she's no good, that kind of a thing. And that's not the case here, as we'll see, but what else can we say about the song? Although there seems to be no direct link here, we have to mention that, of course, Jack Kerouac wrote On the Road. That's at least got to be mentioned as a potential inspiration. But what is the song actually about? The book, Like a Complete Unknown, the poetry of Bob Dylan's songs, 1961 to 1969, says, the song's lyrics continue to address the myth of sensitive artist versus venal society. That informs several other songs from the A-side of the album, such as Maggie's Farm, Outlaw Blues, Bob Dylan's 115th Dream. I could definitely see that as an interpretation of the song, but I don't think we can conclude that that's definitely in there either. The song's pretty absurdist. And I already got on my soapbox in just the last video about how we shouldn't claim things as facts regarding a Dylan song unless there's proof of it. And there's nothing in the song, not one word or line, that indicates that the narrator is an artist. And we'll get to the lyrics and see what kind of a picture he seems to paint about society in it. I'm not sure it's what was just stated. It's more Alice in Wonderland madcap than venal. Here's a depiction of Bob Dylan in a French comic book from the 80s, by the way. And this song, to me, picks up on the last one in the sense that he's leaning even further, much further, into the absurdist angle, but it also plays on a recurrent theme for him throughout his career thus far, which is the tension between being in a relationship but not wanting to be subsumed by it. So don't think twice, it ain't me, babe. And then in terms of delivery, I think it harkens back to Subterranean Homesick Blues from earlier on this album, with a very rapid-fire pace. The other thing about the song is that it goes further back than other songs on this album. It definitely feels like a callback to the real fun and funny stuff from earlier albums, with acoustic numbers like Motorcycle Nightmare, or even all the way back to the Freewheelin' I Shall Be Free. Let's do some song basics. It's 2 minutes and 37 seconds in length, 226 words, and there's 40 lines. 5 stanzas, 8 lines each. It's, once again, for this album, a 12-bar blues. Dylan starts off with a very bluesy harmonica, which he plays elsewhere in the song. Once the harmonica and overall instrumental intro is over, the song really it takes off immediately with the lyrical insanity. First line, by the way, here in the official lyrics is wrong in regards to one word, so ignore that part. As soon as you hear Dylan singing, here's what you hear. Well, I wake up in the morning, there's frogs inside my socks. Your mama, she's hiding inside the ice box. Your daddy walks in wearing a Napoleon Bonaparte mask. Then you ask why I don't live here. Honey, do you have to ask? How about that opening couplet? Talk about an attention getter right off the bat. Well, I wake up in the morning, there's frogs inside my socks. The absurdist madcap air that we talked about is established, immediately. Now, I really like this song, but is there a point in trying to kind of pick apart and analyze the lyrics the way we usually do? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that these lyrics aren't effective. I think they're very effective at what they're trying to do, which is paint this bizarre, surreal scene. And they also firmly establish the theme of the song and the pattern of the song. Dylan is presented with these, his narrator is presented with these ludicrous sights and situations all taking place inside the house or apartment where his girlfriend or love interest lives. And then the penultimate line is always the exact same line. Then you ask why I don't live here. And the final line is always a response, the heart of which is basically like, are you kidding me? From a Dylan obsessive standpoint, we'll notice that we have an appearance here, kind of Napoleon, who will of course show back up, kind of, in Like a Rolling Stone. Regardless, Dylan has met his girlfriend's mother and father. They're both apparently insane. What else is going on in the household? Well, I go to pet your monkey, I get a face full of claws. I ask who's in the fireplace, you tell me Santa Claus. The milkman comes in, he's wearing a derby hat. Then you ask why I don't live here. Honey, how come you have to ask me that? It's presumably not Christmas Eve or morning, so is Santa Claus stuck in the fireplace? Is he dead? We don't know. In terms of rhyme scheme, the stanzas start off either A, B, A, B, or as here, A, B, C, B. Monkey claws, fireplace, claws. But either way, it's the same effect. The important thing is that lines 2 and 4 always rhyme. And the other important part of the rhyme is that lines 6 and 8, so the third to last line and then the last line, always rhyme. If, for instance, in this stanza, he's wearing a derby hat, then you ask why I don't live here. Honey, how come you have to ask me that? What else is crazy about the household? Well, the food situation. So, third stanza. Well, I ask for something to eat, I'm hungry as a hog, so I get brown rice, seaweed, and a dirty hot dog. I've got a hole where my stomach disappeared. Then you ask why I don't live here. Honey, I gotta think you're really weird. Remember we said that lines 6 and 8 always rhyme, and that line 7 is always the exact same line. Then you ask why I don't live here. Doing that accomplishes a few different things. Dylan wants to keep coming back to Then You Ask Why I Don't Live Here. That's always the setup, kind of the joke of the song. It sets up the punchline, which is always a different one, but a variation on the theme. But it also allows him to keep mixing things up, because if, like in more conventional songwriting, the last line rhymed with the one right above it, if he did that, then every single time we'd have to end with the here sound. Here, ear, beer, etc. For instance, the first stanza ends with the SK sound, or ASK sound, because we had a Napoleon Bonaparte mask, then you ask why I don't live here, honey, do you have to ask? But this time it's the eared sound. I've got a hole where my stomach disappeared, then you ask why I don't live here, honey, I gotta think you're really weird. In fact, let's point out the ending sound of every stanza. Ask, that, weird, real, and move. After a slight pause for a nice instrumental break, a pause from the insanity, we jump back into that. So, second to last stanza, penultimate stanza. Your grandpa's cane, it turns into a sword. Your grandma prays to pictures that are pasted on a board. Everything inside my pockets, your uncle steals. Then you ask why I don't live here. Honey, I can't believe that you're for real. As you can tell, we've returned to the girl's family, now the extended family, and they're no less out there than her parents. A total side note, but hey, it's my channel. The couplet about the cane turning into a sword, that evokes obviously what's known as a cane sword, and that was cool for me to cover in this video at this time because my true crime manuscript that I'm shopping around has a whole chapter of crimes committed with sword canes. The couplet right after that, your grandma prays to pictures that are pasted on a board, reminds me of this scene from Masked and Anonymous, Dylan's movie, when Jeff Bridges and Penelope Cruz have their first scene together and he walks in, or they're in their apartment or whatever, but anyway, she's praying to kind of an altar that she made. What else can we say as we just scrounge for things when it comes to this song, which again is a very enjoyable song? One thing is there's a slightly old world aspect to it. We have a cane sword. People in the 60s didn't walk around with cane swords very often. There's the Napoleon Bonaparte mask. No one in the mid-60s was walking around in it. You know, it wasn't like later on in American history, Nixon masks were popular. Yeah, Napoleon masks were not popular in the mid-60s. There's an ice box. Even the grandmother praying to a homemade altar. So anyway, do I think there's much meaning in that? No, but it's just something to note. Let's get to the final stanza. Well, there's fistfights in the kitchen. They're enough to make me cry. The mailman comes in. Even he's got to take a side. Even the butler, he's got something to prove. Then you ask why I don't live here. Honey, how come you don't move? And so we end with a zinger, right? The how come you don't move. Dylan kind of flips the script, and it's over. A funny ending to a funny song. Now let's look at the song structure a little bit further. The 5th and 6th lines of every stanza are their own little subsection and pivot point for that stanza. The first 4 lines of every stanza are 2 pairs that work together regardless of whether it's AB, or AB, CB. And Dylan emphasizes that they are their own subsection with his singing, so for instance, your grandpa's cane, it turns into a sword. Your grandma prays to pictures that are pasted on a board. The next 2 lines are that pivot section that I talked about, and you can see it in the singing. He kind of pivots. Pictures that are pasted on a board. Everything inside my pockets, your uncle steals. And there's a pause there. Always including a harmonica flourish. And then the final section, which is just a couplet. Then you ask why I don't live here. Honey, I can't believe that you're for real. So there's 3 sections to every stanza. The first 4 lines, then the first 2, then the next 2, and then the last 2. And the last sound is always the one from 2 lines up, like we talked about earlier. And I think all of that gives us a pretty good handle on the song. You can see, whether purposefully or not, it's missing much of Dylan's usual wordplay and subtlety. The things I usually spend so much time on highlighting in terms of not just what he's doing with the words, but with meanings as well. But when it comes to the former, the phonetic stuff, it's not that there's nothing. Think of the very start of the song. Well, I wake up in the morning, there's frogs inside my socks. I'm pretty sure any other songwriter, even if they thought of that crazy opening, would have gone, I wake up in the morning, there's frogs inside my socks. But for Dylan, I think it's just innate, just natural to stick the word well in there, because now it's well I weigh, right? WW. Well, I wake up in the morning. And the very next line, your mama, she's hiding inside the ice box. Hiding inside. And you can hear it when he's singing it, even though it goes with hiding, of course, but the I sound twice there strings that together. And that's why she's not living in the ice box or trapped in the ice box. And then the very next line, Napoleon Bonaparte. Listen to how he sings it. Napoleon Bonaparte. And fist fights in the kitchen. You know, why isn't it there's fighting in the kitchen? A fist fights gives you that alliteration with F. But back to the song in general. Like we said earlier, Dylan has some very fun songs, and that was a part of his persona, his makeup, and you could just even get ridiculous. Well, this is a ridiculous song. You can even hear him laughing through the lyrics at one point. Now, we are getting full madcap jokester Dylan on this one, and it's fun for us and for him. But is there anything, intellectually interesting in the song, as there so often is with his music? Can it make you think about anything? I think so, maybe a little, definitely not his most profound or anything, but, I used the allusion to Alice in Wonderland earlier, and that's how I think of this song. This is Dylan's Alice in Wonderland. His character, the narrator, is kind of the normal one, staring around at all these crazy and eccentric characters. And what's interesting about that is it's kind of an inversion of what we've seen elsewhere on this album, specifically with Subterranean Homesick Blues. where, he and his ilk, they're the rebels, they're the cultural rebels, they're the nonconformists, they're the mad ones. And that's more the norm for, a guy who's being called the voice of his generation in the mid-60s. But in this song, everyone else, I guess maybe his girlfriend excluded, we don't really learn anything about her, but her whole family, they're the mad ones. To the point that it's just a surreal scene when you're there with them in that house. In Subterranean Homesick Blues, it was, well, no, I want to be outside of regular society. I don't want the white picket fence and the boring life, the nuclear family that was sold to everyone in the 1950s and early 60s. Dylan and his girlfriend, they should be the weird ones, but instead it's the family that they're the really weird ones. Going through the lyrics, you'll see everything is about like this bizarre scene of domesticity. It's not just all the family members that are insane, but even the milkman and the postman are bizarre. The family, the postman, the milkman, all of them, they make the beatniks, folkies, proto-hippies, all of them look positively boring in comparison. And that's a fun subversion of expectations. But is there meaning to that? Probably not, but, is he satirizing something in particular? People have thrown out some hypotheses. He's satirizing everything from the mainstream culture to the hippie, proto-hippie culture. The Greenwich Village scene that he was a part of at the time, and then we had the hypotheses from way earlier in the video from that writer, so they're all over the map. I don't really see much to any of them. To me, the song is Dylan taking an old song as a starting point and ending up somewhere very different but still tied to the original inspiration. That is his main process, as he's spelled out specifically in later years. And what he does, where he ends up, is in a fun, absurdist portrait of a family in a home, what's supposed to be the center of normalcy in American culture at the time. In that sense, what the song is a lot like? And I'm definitely going to be the first one to bring this up, but it's true. And two very similar television shows that both debuted in September of '64, The Addams Family for one, and the other, The Munsters. They were both doing, to a large extent, what Dylan's doing later in this song. Is there a chance he was inspired by either one of these? But that was the joke. That was what these shows were about, is, whoa, this is so strange. These people are insane, but it's a household and a family. This is supposed to be the seat of normalcy. The boring dad, the Stepford wife, the two kids. In fact, the normal family member from the Munsters, that was more of an Addams Family kid than Munsters, so I never really watched that one, but, she was the daughter or the niece or whatever she was. You could almost imagine part of the inspiration for the song being, of course, the number On the Road Again, like we talked about, but then Dylan imagining himself dating her. And, for what it's worth, Dylan does have a whole song riffing on Frankenstein. And, of course, Herman Munster was a riff on Frankenstein as well. But now we're in a pure wild speculation when it comes to the possible inspiration angle. However, I do think it's interesting. They were touching on the same line of humor as the song. And that song was On the Road Again. Thanks for watching.